You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello and welcome to another episode of Business Wealth Impact. Today we have Michael Reinhart on the show. Michael is a coach and speaker specializing in leadership, resilience, and critical decision making. He possesses a rare combination of experience because he's a former criminal prosecutor and a superior court judge. He's also an explorer, having traveled across 4 continents. He's gone into jungles, over deserts, and climbed mountains, experiencing the wild places and its people. And he has a podcast about that. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
So I'm so excited to have you on the show. I really am, because I feel that people really do struggle with decision making. And I'm thrilled that there's somebody on the show that can break it all down and talk about this in a very organized way. So, and I know you coach your clients on this. So, Michael, why don't you, first of all, break down for us, what is decision making? Why is it important and how to do it?
Well, let's take it at its most basic level. A decision is somebody who's faced with, I want to change. I want to do something different. Now, what happens is, to be able to make a good decision, you have to be confident. But we live in a world of uncertainty. You never have enough all the information there is to know about whatever decision. So the uncertainty creates anxiety, fear, which then diminishes your confidence. And it's a tension between the two that people have to live in, and the environment in which they make their decisions, whether they recognize that or not. And it's how well you handle that tension between uncertainty and the need to be confident in your decision that produces the quality of your decisions. So that's at the very basic, that's what's happening. And so, you need to be clear and calm to make really good decisions, especially in critical times, high stress, high consequence environments. And so the more you can train yourself and acquire the skills to be confident and move forward, even in the face of uncertainty, the higher the better the quality of your decisions, which actually increases the probability of success. And and this tension creates anxiety and fear. You've all experienced it, where you got to make a decision, and all of a sudden you get this adrenaline dump, and your heart starts pounding, and you're trying to think, but your focus really narrows, and your brain's going haywire. You can't make good decisions in those kind of situations. So you have to learn to exist in that environment, to calm yourself down, because you'll never be perfectly calm, but you need to reduce that anxiety to keep your mind clear to make that high probability success decision. If that makes sense.
Okay. Yes. So the first thing is we got to calm our emotions, because being emotional and not calm, we all know that we're spinning, and it's really hard to stop spinning and say, okay, how do I make this decision? So first of all, we got to calm ourselves to a certain extent, to think,
Right.
okay, so there's like a playing field. Okay, now we got this clear kind of little clearing in the woods. All right. Then, we all struggle with this. We'll think about decisions, we'll make them, and then we triple guess and we go back and did I do the right thing? And I think a large part of the stress of decision making is to backtrack after you've made the decision, which I'm not a fan of. I'm a fan of do everything, make the decision, and then, deal with it. Not to go back and change the decision. And I feel like that's a big stressor for people. Have you found that as well?
It is. So at that premise, what you need to do is, at the very basic level, you have to have a mindset that recognizes the uncertainty, understands that things will happen. Sometimes recognize bad things will happen and anticipate them. And the way I like to explain it to folks is, if you had a darkened hallway and I sent you down that hallway to a door way down the other side, and you're walking down that hallway, all of a sudden somebody jumps out from behind a darkened door, pops a balloon, and boom, right? You're going to be scared. Your brain's going to be frazzled until you recover. If I send you down the hallway and I said, somewhere along the line, somebody's going to jump out and scare you from behind, pop a balloon, but I'm not going to tell you where.
Mm.
As you walk down, when that happens, you'll be startled,
Mm.
but the startling event, your reaction is not going to peak nearly as high. You're going to
Mhm.
recover much faster
Mm.
and be able to continue your journey.
Mm.
So if you always go into decisions and into projects knowing I don't know everything,
Mhm.
things are going to happen. And when they happen, that's why I'm here. We're going to deal
Mm.
with it. And
Mm.
so if you start out with that whole mentality in the beginning, when it happens, you're not throwing off your pace. You're not throwing off the mark,
Mm.
and you can recover better and then adjust your course. It
Mm.
also makes you calmer if you have that going, we're going into this project. We don't know everything. We're going to engage in risk management and all the other things we need to do. But we also know that we have the ability and the skills and the mindset that come what may, we can handle it.
Mhm.
And so think about going into and making that decision in that
Mm.
frame of mind, as opposed to overthinking everything, going, oh my gosh, what can happen? Everything could
Mm.
go wrong and the world could go haywire. Or the complete opposite. And you just go, I'm just going to roll the dice and see what happens. And then when it happens, that's a bad way to make a decision also. So
Right.
you see that mindset sets you up so that you can be far more confident in the face of uncertainty.
Mm. Now, what you said is so true. You are never going to have 100% of the information on anything. But yet people always say, I just want to get all the information. And I'm thinking, well, that's never going to happen because you're never going to have all the information. And even when you think you have all the information, stuff left out, there's stuff left out and you never know about it. So what do you think about Colin Powell's decision making? You know about his system where he gets anywhere from 45, well, he's passed away now, but his system was that you should get between 45 and 75% of the information and make a decision then. Not wait till you think you have 100%, because as far as he was concerned, as the former Secretary of State, people are dying at that point if you don't make any decision. So, and I realized in my life that I was already doing that. I was already probably more towards the 75%, sometimes 50. I would be thinking, I'm never going to know everything about this and I'm just overthinking it. And what they tell me is not really all the information because they don't know everything. So I'm just going to make a decision between this. And I know I don't have everything, but if I wait, it's going to be too late or I'm just going to keep spinning my wheels. And I had figured that out actually before I read about that I already do that. And I thought, well, I was very validated because sometimes I thought maybe that's a dumb way to make decisions. But apparently it's not. It's to just go for it. And then my thing was, once you made a decision, just you've made it, make the best of it, unless it could be reversed easily. But if it's not about reversing it and just living in regret, there's no point because you can't change it. So, can you break down further your whole decision making process that you use as a judge and you used for years as a prosecutor and also as an adventure person?
Yeah, so let's refine that Colin Powell
Mm.
method. Risk management includes training and everything, but also acquiring information. Well,
Hmm.
how you only have limited resources,
Hmm.
so how much do you put to mitigate the risk of failure, bad things happening?
Hmm.
Uh, and the easiest way to put that is what I learned in climbing school when they taught us how much protection and safety and all the other things you have to do in mountaineering to keep from falling and dying.
Hmm.
And it was very simple. It was how much is based upon the risk of fall and the consequence of fall.
Mm.
And that's at a very basic level. That'll tell you how much risk management, how much resources you need.
Hmm.
If the risk of fall is high, but the consequences of the fall are negligible, you're not going to put a whole lot of resources into trying to acquire all the information because the consequences are light and you
Hmm.
don't need to. But if the risk of fall and the consequence of the fall, or the risk of the decision and the consequence of failure are very, very high, you're going to move a lot of resources into risk management, which means
Mm.
you get up to the higher levels of how much information am I going to acquire.
Mhm.
And so you're moving all those resources to get more and more and more information in order to reduce the probabilities of failure. Now, you're never going
Mm.
to be at 100%, but that's going to tell you, am I going to be only at 45% make a decision?
Mm.
Or am I going to really put a lot of my company's resources
Mhm.
into acquiring the information and what I need to at the 75, 80% level?
Mm.
Because failure could be catastrophic. It could
Mhm.
destroy, my business could go under.
Right.
So there's your sliding scale of
Mm.
risk management when you're going into a project.
Mm. Okay, so it depends on the type of decision. How you're making the decisions differently depending on the risk of the decision. A smaller
You're
decision, like what am I gonna eat for dinner, is should be a quick one.
right. So you're not going to put in a lot of
No.
resources for risk management.
Right.
Now, the decision is separate from risk management.
Mhm.
Your decision is you have made a decision. I need to go this place. I need my
Mm.
company to do X, Y, and Z in order for us to fulfill its missions, goals,
Mhm.
whatever it is. When you've made that decision, then you do the calculations of consequence of failure versus probabilities of failure.
Mhm.
Okay, going into this, this is the decision I'm going to make.
Mhm.
How much resource am I going to put on the table to mitigate risks? And
Mm.
whether you're in a corner office or you're planning to climb up a very dangerous mountain, leaders who are successful and survive, they understand that and they take risk management uh,
Mm.
very, very seriously.
Mhm.
It's almost it's a passion, it's a religion. It's you got to engage in risk management
Right.
because you don't want to fail. And this aids you in your decision making because if you
Mm.
know I got to make this hard decision, I
Mm.
also know that I need to mitigate risks. The more I get that formula correct,
Mm.
the more confident I am in proceeding with this decision.
Right. Okay, so that's good because what I'm understanding is that the risk mitigation is the anchor for all decisions. And then once you have an anchor, then it's not just, oh, I'm just making a decision. I've already done my risk mitigation. I've done that analysis. And it just makes the decision making easier in a way.
It makes you more confident in
Mm.
making your decision.
Right. Which makes it easier because people flail a lot.
Yeah, you're less stressed. Yeah.
Mm.
So let's say you have a high consequence of failure decision, but you don't put much resources into it.
Mm.
You're not going to be sleeping at night, right?
Yes.
Because
Yeah,
all
exactly.
these things could happen. All the uncertainty out there that you know is going to happen, and you haven't done enough to prepare. On the
Mm.
other hand, if you've done everything that you can that is required to do based upon your analysis, then it is what it is. You sleep better. You still understand that something can happen, but you've
Mhm.
mitigated those risks to a much narrower universe of possibilities. But the second part of your question was
Mhm.
always going back and rethinking about, did I make the right decision? A good decision maker has the opposite. You don't question whether you've made the right decision because you've already committed. But
Mhm.
what you have to have is a forward looking understanding that I need to adjust course
Mhm.
because things will change. We live in, like I say, an uncertain society. Everything's changing.
Mhm.
Even if you stand still, everything's changing around you. So you can't help it. But you're always prepared then to adjust course as consequences and situations develop.
Mhm.
And if you go
Mhm.
into the project with that understanding, when it happens, you go, okay, here we go. We needed to adjust course. It's like the old saying, an airplane is off course just about the entire time it's in its flight
Mhm.
until it lands because
Right.
it's always having to
Course correction.
adjust.
Mhm.
Right. Because you have air currents, you've got air temperatures, you've got
Mhm.
everything that's affecting that plane moving off course. And it's only at the very end because they continually adjust that it
Mm.
makes that nice, safe landing and everybody gets to the airport on time.
Right.
So if you think about it, that you're the pilot and you're constantly adjusting course, it makes you far more confident in the decision making and in the execution of those
Mhm.
decisions.
Right. Now, for work related things, the decision is just the beginning of a journey sometimes, as you pointed out, because you
Right.
make a decision. There are certain decisions in life where it's like, that's it, like getting married. And you could course correct and get a divorce. Okay. But, or what house do I buy? Because I think people struggle with, should I buy that house? Investments, certain investments, you put the money in and there's no course, see what happens. Right. And I think also investing in services like a coach or, stuff like that. Um, how did you so there, to me there's the types of decisions, there are different categories of decisions. A life decision that you cannot change, like, I don't know, having another baby. We can't change that. So how do you know what I mean? How do people decide on things like that? That's different than a business decision. Well, you will course correct because you might fire the person that you hired, you might hire more people, you might start a campaign, but it didn't work. So, yes, with business, you have to always be on your feet. And I'm big on course correction, as you know. So basically, we break it down. There is do your risk mitigation, look at um, what the consequences could be of a bad decision, okay, in this particular context, and how much
Well,
protection do you need? Because you gave the example of you have a high probability of falling, but there won't be much damage, so it's no biggie. High probability of falling, much damage, we're going to do much more risk mitigation because you could die, right? And it's interesting because when we see these adventurers, I always wonder, like, is it random? I guess they're following very strict protocols, so they're not going to die, right? Because nobody wants.
the ones who come back and be able to tell the story,
Mm,
yes.
right. So these are the smarter ones that are at the drawing board a little bit longer than just running off, right?
Oh, I tell you, I've interviewed a lot of explorers and adventurers,
Mhm,
and to a person, when we talk about risk mitigation,
mhm,
that's when they get serious. Go, yes, you've
mm,
got to do your homework. You've got to do the training. You've got to
mm,
do the research. I interviewed West Hansen, who kayaked the entire length of the Amazon,
mm,
and he did everything. He would contact missionaries who had been in those parts of the Amazon jungle.
mm,
He had contacted others who had kayaked parts of the river. He had read books. He had gone to the old histories of people who had been in there. I mean, to a T,
mm,
he knew as much as he could
mhm,
because he was in charge of people who were going to be at serious risk. He was
mm,
literally going through places where if the river didn't kill you, the animals might, or
mm,
the malaria would do it.
mhm,
And there were still places you were going through where the indigenous people there would kill you. So
mm.
if you're faced with that kind of project,
Mhm.
you're going to do a lot in order to mitigate the risks.
Of course.
And that's how they survive.
Mm. Of course. I mean, you don't wanna have that thing like, the early explorers that had very little information. It's like, "Oh, they didn't know, and darn it, they got eaten by crocodiles because, or they didn't know that that part of the river, blah, blah, blah." But now there's no reason to not do your research because we have a lot more information, and we're not the first people in the Americas just, like, winging it and dying most of the time. But it's so interesting you say that because I was faced with something like this the other day. Was driving from Miami, and for the first time, my Tesla usually it has a lot of extra charge, but I missed the turn and there wasn't enough. It was in the middle of nowhere, and usually there's some destination charger, and that's my fallback. But I couldn't get anywhere, and I thought, "Whoa, okay, I need to stop." Because so I stopped. I'm glad I made that decision because I thought, "Okay, I have 10% left on the Tesla." Now it's in a place called Alligator Alley. I thought that was just a cute name. Okay, so I'm there on the side of the road, it's getting dark, and I thought, "Okay, I need to get somebody here." And then they say, "Okay, the tow is gonna be 2 hours." I said, "It's gonna be pitch black. I'm gonna be in the middle of nowhere in the pitch black." And they said, "Sorry." And then a bad accident on the other side of the road happened. People were being airlifted, and the tow truck driver said, "It's gonna be 3 hours." And I said, "What?" And he says to me, "You have to listen. You need to get out of the car, and you see that fence?" I said, "Uh-huh." He goes, "That's for the wild animals." I said, "Are you kidding me?" He goes, "No, there's a lot of wild animals where you are in Florida." I said, "You're joking." He said, "No, I'm not. Get out of the car. The wild animals, that will keep the wild animals out." And he says, "And then you'd go over the rail, because then if you're sitting in the car, it is a common thing. It is not uncommon." He repeated it. It is common that a car on the handle, shoulder, whatever it's called, cars behind it crash into that car and you will die sitting in the car. He said, "Not uncommon." And I said, "You want me to get out of the car in the dark and be across this rail?" And he said, "Yes, I do, for your safety." So I did it. I was in the pitch black behind a rail. But then I started thinking, I thought, wait, this is not actually the smartest thing to do. Because if he's saying that it's common that somebody that bangs into the car, that is driving, they get sleepy or they're drunk, bashes into the car, and I'm on the other side of the rail in front of the car, I could still be killed.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I thought, wait, I'm standing there. I could still be killed by shrapnel. It's just a little 2-foot thing. So I opted to stand 20 feet behind the car, because by the time the car is hit, that's going to go forward. But then later on, I found out there's like snakes there that can like squish you like anacondas, and there's alligators. And one of my friends said, "It's so dangerous there." He said, "The guy was right." I said, "I thought I heard stuff." So I agree that that decision, if I'd stayed in the car, I could have been killed because some car. So there's a point where I went through every single point and I mitigated every bit of risk and even stood. So I see what you're saying here. I got the information I could. And then I thought, wait a minute, there's another piece. I should be standing way behind the car, not in front of it. Makes sense? So luckily nothing happened. And I didn't get killed. But stuff happens out of the blue, and you've got to. Now that's not the wilds, not like what you've been through, but it was kind of the wilds of Florida. But it made me realize that one of not charging all the way when I was in Miami to get the extra charge created that string of events.
Yeah, the decision started with you getting in the car, wanting to go to a destination.
Yes.
So that really was that really was the initiating
Mm-hmm.
decision. But you had to adjust and accommodate to, things that happened and unexpectedly happened along the way.
Mm.
And so, next time you make a decision to do this sort of adventurous driving through Alligator Alley, you'll be far more confident. You'll be wiser too, because of the experience,
Well,
and that
oh, I
makes you
did.
actually.
I did, because the next time I did it, I made sure I had a full charge. Just the other day. So now, how did you come to all this? You were talking about something that happened when you were 12. Tell us the story of how, what happened?
Yeah, this started with an old Navy diver. I was 12 years old, and I wanted to learn how to scuba dive. And in California, at least at that time, you couldn't be certified until you're 13. But I wanted to be a scuba diver, and so I was pestering my mom, and she finally relented to my surprise. And so I started taking scuba lessons, and I would actually, quote unquote, graduate right after my 13th birthday. So I'd be able to be a certified scuba diver. And so she takes me down to the local pool, and the instructor is this old Navy diver. At least, to a 12-year-old kid, he was old. And if you just picture what an old Navy diver would look like, that was him. Big, gruff, and he really was a taskmaster in training. We were doing laps. We were swimming all the time. He would send us down to the deep end of the pool to work on some type of skill. And then he would sneak up behind us as we were underwater, breathing in their scuba gear, doing the task. And he'd sneak up behind us and turn off our air,
Mm,
or he'd take our mask off, or he'd do something
mm,
just to, see how we would react and to teach us not to panic.
mm,
So it was very smart that way. To a 12-year-old kid, I didn't know what it all meant. And then finally came our checkout dive. And it's a pass fail to get your certification. So we go out to the coast here in California, and the water's cold.
mhm,
It was like 50 degrees. The reason I know is somebody had a thermometer on their watch and showed us. So his checkout dive test was ingenious. We go out into the kelp bed, and a kelp bed is basically an underwater forest.
mm,
We go down about 40 feet, and the water's water's really cold. The first thing he had us do was take off our scuba mask. And that cold water just hits you. And, it sucks the air out of you. And that's your first test of are you going to
Mm,
panic? Because that really induce it. And
mhm,
then if you didn't panic and you stayed there, then we had to, without a mask, our eyes open underwater in this kelp bed, we had to follow him through the kelp bed and come out through the other side.
mm.
So, you think about it, having looking underwater, no mask, salt water stinging the cold eyes, trying to follow him through. And his whole
Wow.
idea was to teach us not to panic, because if you panic and you shot up, there's a good chance you die.
Mhm,
But also that
mhm,
whatever happened, you can figure it out. You can work the problem. And so
mm,
uh, we go through the kelp bed, and I passed, and at least didn't panic. And so we come up onto the beach, and I'm taking off my gear, and I was a skinny little kid. Yeah, the gear weighed more than I did, so I take off all the
mm.
gear. And while we were down there, this Navy diver had knocked off some rock scalps, and he was over by the sink, and then he waves me over, and he's just washing the scallops, and I'm just this little kid. I don't know if I passed or not, or what's happening. All of a sudden, he cracks one open, and then he hands me one of the raw scallops, and he goes, "Kid, didn't think you were going to make it." And so I ate the raw scallop, and it was sort of a rite of passage. But it's the lessons that
Mm,
that Navy diver taught me was that you know you have to be cool under pressure no matter what happens. Whatever's thrown at you, you got to sit there and be calm and work the problem. And that lesson
mm,
has stayed with me my entire life. Yeah, I still get goosebumps because it was such an experience, and it's saved my life a few times. So that's
mm,
where it all started.
mm. That's so powerful, and nobody teaches like that. I think the
Yeah,
liability of teaching
they
like that is
should
high.
teach that way, but they don't.
If something happened, but what would happen if somebody did panic at that before they're certified? There's liability there, right?
Yeah, and the whole teaching is so you don't.
Right. But I'm saying for him as a teacher, there was liability. What if something happened?
Yeah,
Was there some backup if you guys panicked and nothing?
nope.
Okay.
It was just all of us were just down there at the bottom in the dark
Wow.
water and
Yeah,
the
that
cold,
that's
and
very risky for him with people that are not certified divers to put you through that. You couldn't do that now. I mean, I think nobody would take that liability on because he would be liable.
I'm sure they wouldn't. Yeah, I'm sure they wouldn't. But if you think about it, it was a real
Mhm,
life. No, no handrails,
mhm.
no safety
Yeah,
nets. It was okay. He had been training us
to do
though
that.
to be able
Yeah.
to do that.
Wow. Did all the people get through though, even though they didn't pass the test? Did they all get through and follow him with salt water in your eyes? You can hardly see even with fresh water in your eyes.
I should know this, but I don't because I wasn't paying
You were
attention to anybody
you were
else.
just like, "Yeah, get through it." But the same number of people emerged as plunged, right? So we're good, I think.
Yeah, there was no
No
deaths.
death.
There was no
No,
deaths, but
that's very good because so many people die from scuba diving accidents of panicking and there's a whole job for people that go and get people out of caves.
yeah,
Cave diving. There's an actual job of people going in and getting the bodies out. There's so many. I don't think that they're fully prepared to to be diving in caves if a lot of people are dying. It's such a shame. It's terrible.
oh, cave diving is probably the most dangerous thing you could ever
Right.
do. I've interviewed a couple of cave
Mm.
divers, and it's it's
Very
something
scary.
else.
Not something you would do, right?
Well,
No,
no,
I wouldn't either.
because I don't have the
Yes.
training, and
It's too
um,
risky.
oh wow. Well, I was interviewing a guy, and John Hall, who's a famous mountaineer, and in his early days, he was thinking of becoming a cave diver. And John's,
Mm,
you talk about guts and skill and everything. He's
mhm,
got them all. So he goes to Italy to start school for cave diving, and he was
mhm.
rooming with a very famous cave diver who was there, and he was talking to him, and the conversation went on, and then the experienced cave diver John asked him some question. He said, "Yeah, I don't have any friends anymore because they all died."
Oh,
Everyone that he started out cave
oh,
diving with has died. And
terrible.
and John, who has climbed Everest, who has done all the things that a real mountaineer does, said, I think I'm not going to be a cave diver.
It's
Which
just it's too high. It's just such high it's not worth it unless you have a death wish. Okay, so that's how you got into this mindset. Do you feel like that had something to you for you? Did that have something to do with you becoming a prosecutor and then a judge, the whole decision thing?
I think it was more the adrenaline
Mm,
and, you know, being able to be a good decision maker, especially in critical decisions situations, is something that's acquired over time. It's a skill that is just learned, honed.
mhm,
You just keep working at it.
mm,
Um, I became a prosecutor because I really enjoyed the dynamics of a courtroom, which does
mm,
require you make decisions in real time based
mhm,
upon information that just jumps out at you. That's
mhm,
what trials are. There, you think you're prepared, but something
mm,
crazy always happens, and you got to deal with it. So it was it was fun,
mm,
tense, anxiety ridden, but yeah, that's what led me into that. But it also
mm.
honed those skills of being able to think on your feet, make the
Yes.
best decision you can, keep calm no matter what happens. I mean,
Mhm,
a witness goes completely 180 degrees from what you thought.
mhm,
Just remain calm, work the
mhm.
problem, smile. Nope, this doesn't hurt, and keep going.
Get through it. Well, I think that we would all be lucky if, all the judges were like you. Okay, so Mike, this has been really interesting. So before we close off the show, what's one mindset or I mean, you just said, keep calm at all times, but what's another that's probably the one that you would say, but what's another mindset or philosophy that you live by that you want to share with people?
Embrace the chaos.
Mm,
Just embrace the chaos. It's a dynamic world out there, and there's good and there's bad and there's everything in between, just flying all over the place. And try not to get too caught up in it, and every once in a while just step back and watch and just go, wow, did you see that?
mm,
And don't have it control you. Probably the way to explain it was when I went to kayak school and learning how to whitewater kayak, and you learn that the river's going to take you where the river's going to take you. And that's life. It's going to take you wherever
mhm,
it's going to take you. There's currents, there's rapids, there's all kinds of things. Now you got to paddle and you have some control over where you can go at times. And at
mhm,
other times you don't. And you just got to
mm,
enjoy the ride.
mm. I love that because we can't control everything, and I think we're all trying
Mhm.
to control everything. So, Mike, this has been highly interesting. How do people reach you to inquire about your decision and critical thinking coaching?
They can go to my profile on LinkedIn, or I've got
Hmm.
a small website,
Hmm.
reinhartleadershipcoaching.com, and
Mm,
just get a hold of me one of those two
awesome.
places.
Great. And then we'll have that in the show notes. Mike, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this conversation about critical decision making. And I'll see you on the next one. You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.